I'm Naya, mom, boob nerd, board-certified lactation consultant, and lover of lipstick and curse words. I'm that weird Indian girl you knew in high school, all grown up.
And I'm Alexis, mom, birth nerd, and therapist plus doula, encouraging parents to hold joy plus what the fuck is this mess simultaneously. Some people think I'm too much, but those aren't my people.
And we are the Top Knot Squad.
TKS is a tiny little podcast about motherhood in real life, the good, the bad, the ugly AF.
Hosted by two women that are passionate about our beliefs and unafraid to speak our minds.
Friends that wanted to create space for all that ish we are too scared to talk about.
Are you ready to laugh, be vulnerable, and keep it real with us?
Top knots are not required.
If the Top Knot Squad content makes you laugh, nod in agreement, or makes you feel less alone, we'd love your support in the cost of producing this podcast. Visit patreon.com/topknotsquad to learn more about our budget-friendly sponsorship tiers and how you can help ensure that TKS has a future. Every little bit helps. On this episode, the squad talks about anxiety and adolescence. While our kiddos aren't teenagers yet, though Naya's about to be mom to a tween and Alexis feels like she's parenting a teen, we're always happy to learn more about ways to help them through tough moments. Okay, that's putting it lightly. When we think back to ourselves as being teens, there's a lot of cringing and we aren't looking forward to what's to come. To learn more about ways to support our older children and teens with anxiety, we've brought on our guest, Courtney Harris. As a life coach for teens and parents, Courtney supports tweens, teens, and young adults in finding their voice and growing confidence. Courtney supports parents in practicing self-care, maintaining personal growth, and developing balanced sensitivity towards the process their rapidly changing child is creating. Sessions with Courtney lovingly guide families in overcoming isolation as they develop the trust, communication, and connection that's crucial for a life of ease. Courtney is proud to elevate the voices and needs of each client she has the honor of serving. She's dedicated to inclusive, anti-oppressive work in both her personal and professional relationships and in the systems she works and lives in. Thanks for being here, Courtney.
Thank you all for having me. I'm excited.
Yay.
So this season, we're trying something a little bit different. We want to kick off each episode with kind of a check-in. And so we've been calling it our what the fuck and fuck yeah moment. So if you want to share, a what the fuck related moment or maybe a fuck yeah related moment from the last week, the last day, the last month, whatever you want to. Alexis, do you want to go first this time? Okay, I can go first. Let's see. What is a fuck yeah moment I've had? I don't even know. It's all been what the fuck moments lately. It's just, I'm going to say the same one as the last episode that we recorded because I just got a note that my kid did not finish doing more of his schoolwork that he said he had finished. So it's a never-ending battle in my house. So I've been really looking forward to talking with you, Courtney, about trying to get on the same page and figure out what's going on.
You're not alone in that.
I thought of a fuck yeah. I thought of one.
Okay, what is it?
So my new job comes with like a stipend, like a work from home stipend where you can get things that you might need. And I just ordered an office chair. So I'm very excited about that. And it's like plush and green. It's like a very pretty, like, I can't think of the type of green it would be, like jade.
Oh, pretty.
Yeah. It's very modern, which is not my style at all, but apparently I wanted that in an office chair.
Sometimes things just tell you that you need to buy them.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Courtney?
I can't really think of a specific what the fuck moment, which is interesting but maybe it's just because everything gets so globby and everything's like melding into the same feeling. But I think the fuck yeah moment, one that's ongoing is I'm making banana bread basically on repeat, and I only eat baked goods for breakfast during the pandemic, always with chocolate chips. Yes. And that's amazing. Yes. And then the other one is that I've gotten to attend some births during the pandemic, since I'm also a birth worker, and just went to one last week. And so that's kind of like another moment of hope and joy in this time.
Aww.
Yes, very much so. And we'll take them where we can get them right now.
Yes.
Yeah, I've had this theory that COVID babies are like the best babies. Although one of my friends that has a baby said not true because her baby has colic. But I don't know. Reese is just like the most lovely human, and I just love him.
That's so special.
So, but let's dive into your story. Can you tell us a little bit about, how you found your way to this career and working with this population, and what kind of inspired you to do this work?
Yeah, I think it's a mashup of personal and professional stuff. So my own teen years definitely feel like years where I was kind of like outside of myself, which in many ways is quite developmentally normal because the teenage brain is like, it is programmed to be noticing what's happening outside. Like, what are my peers doing? What's the norm? What do I want to be doing? What do I not want to be doing? But I feel like I also in that process lost like the tether to the inside, right? To like my internal compass. And so I feel like my teen years were pretty isolating. My parents, I don't think had a full like depth of understanding of what I was experiencing. I didn't really have vocabulary or words for it. So I think it was a lot of like silent suffering that I was going through. And it wasn't really until later that I recognized how serious that was or how like, how big that was impacting me. So had that experience. And then in my professional journey, became a teacher. Right out of undergrad, I became a teacher. And I started in mid school and then ended up becoming a high school teacher. And it's like, I continued to see sort of that pattern that resonated with my own experience and seeing that teens were sort of like grasping, looking for the support network, like trying to build their support network. And there were still gaps because they don't want to go to their parents for everything. Also normal. Teachers have a specific role, they have to give grades at the end of the day. So there's a different kind of power system and structure. And I could just see there's like this gap where teens do need more mentors. And some of them get it through sports and things like that. Or if they're in other extracurriculars, they might have those adults that are more of a partner and a mentor. But I really saw that need and felt like, well, I don't actually really give a shit about giving lectures as a teacher. I don't really care about like giving grades. I care about the human part of this. And so it just kind of like clarified, it kind of came to the surface of like, oh, I'm already a coach, like in the style that I had as a teacher. So yeah, it just kind of like naturally came to me. And I didn't really know that life coaching was really a thing necessarily until I started looking more into it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I didn't know you were a teacher before. That's really cool.
Thanks. For 10 whole years. So
wow.
A decent amount of time too.
I think that a lot of teachers probably enter that field for the human aspect and then are just bogged down by systems, right?
Yes, always the system.
So Courtney, can you tell us a little bit about what anxiety in teenagers can look like? Are the signs or symptoms similar to what adults experience?
Yeah, so it's interesting because, I'm not I'm not working from a clinical angle. I'm not a therapist. I am a coach, but I do work with and see a lot of anxiety in my practice. And I would say, yeah, a lot of the manifestations of anxiety look similar to what adults might, be experiencing. But I think from, the folks who are listening, parents and caregivers, it's good for them to sort of like know the range that it may look like, right? Because sometimes it looks very external. It looks like, complete overwhelm, or it looks like big tears and crying. And other times it's going to look like shut down, like door closed, head down, whatever those kind of like shut down behaviors are. And then of course, it can show up as more like panic in moments, which I think is kind of like the combination of those like big emotion and shutdown. But, some of the ways that it shows up that are less direct is like a lot of missing school assignments. That doesn't always mean anxiety, but that's one way it could be showing up. Or not wanting to go to certain extracurriculars that they have all of a sudden, sort of like a shift in not wanting to do something that used to bring pleasure or used to be sort of just part of routine.
Yeah, those are really helpful. And I know that at least with myself and dealing with anxiety, that was a big one for me. All of the things that were that I loved to do, all of a sudden I didn't want to do anymore. And that was, something I was like, wait, why am I trying to talk myself out of going out to see this friend? This I've been looking forward to this for so long, kind of thing.
Yeah, I totally relate to that.
I was also going to say that is so difficult now, which we plan on talking about, is like even the act of escaping, if that's what you're doing to cope, is like so hard right now because everybody's home and you can't go out and do things. Well, you can. Let me take that back. Not everybody is home and not doing things like I am. Mm-hmm. But for some people, that's a concern.
Yes. Yeah, I do think that's something, and I know we'll talk more about it, but I have seen that shift in my practice where young people are just kind of like, well, what the hell am I supposed to do? Like the tools or the things that had previously been their ways of coping. It's like, okay, time to reassess because these are not accessible right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One thing I know that is accessible, especially while some of us are still kind of self-isolating or not really going to a lot of places, is social media. And I know that we all know that social media can have really terrible consequences, especially when it comes to things like bullying or being excluded. Do you have any tips for parents of teens or even preteens that may be listening about social media?
Yeah, I think it's so tough because it is just integrated into so many parts of their lives, because even in school, there could be assignments that connect to social media. So it's like literally integrated. So the biggest thing is, I think it's important to treat it like a relationship, right? To say, what's your relationship with technology like? What's your relationship with your social media like? And actually looking at it like that, because it's not just, it's not simply a tool, right? It's something that requires maintaining like a relationship. It is draining. It is exhausting like a relationship. Sometimes it's life-giving like a relationship. So I think framing it in that language can also help sort of destigmatize it, because the truth is all young people are tired of older people telling them to get off their devices. They already know. They already know that you're like, that they're past their limit, that they're whatever. Like, they already know all the things that we're going to say to them. So I think the reframe of looking at it like a relationship and helping them look at it that way can be a little bit more empowering, where they can be more reflective and actually think about what is working when I'm on social media, what is not working. And I think that's the goal, right? For them to feel empowered, for them to be making the choices versus it just being like parents setting the limits, which of course is sometimes also completely necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, I mean, I don't have teenagers, but screen time has been like atrocious. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
Atrocious. Yeah.
Since COVID, because I mean, my kids are still doing virtual learning. So that's all on screens. That's all apps. Everything's on the computer, which, like, I don't know. I just have like, I'm conflicted, I guess, in that, I still want I feel bad that they're getting screen time that way and it's taking away from them being able to have fun screen time. So I want to make sure that I allow space for that, because I don't want them to view screens as you're using this as a torture device.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want them to be on screens all day long. Like, I'm noticing the impact of that as well. So when we've set limits, it's like the big feeling and emotion that comes when that limit is put into place is like so exponentially bigger and louder and crazier than it's ever been. And I'm just automatically associating that with COVID, like that COVID plus we threw a baby at them. But I don't know if you have thoughts about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. My brain is going to sort of like like attracts like idea where, when you've opened your Instagram app so many times and you're like, I'm not even enjoying it, but then you go do it again. And there's sort of that like impulsive draw. And I think that does happen with young people, certainly, not to mention that all these devices and things are actually engineered to be addictive.
Yes.
But I think that sometimes it's like, that's what young people think they want more. Well, they think they want more, or it feels like they want more. And it's kind of just because that's like the pattern that they're in. And so, yeah, it seems like that meltdown or that big emotion is because it's like, that's where their energy is going towards that one thing. So looking at other options is just not in their field right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I wrote down what you said about treat it like a relationship. I want to try to change my language with them around that. Like even 6 and he's almost 8. That feels doable. I know you're talking about teens, but that like blew my mind when you said that. But I also learned, sorry, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but I also learned recently that it can be really helpful when you end screen time to do a grounding activity. Because I didn't know this, but most people have the assumption that like screen times are very like you're vegging out. I'm not thinking of words.
Tuning out.
Like your
like
brain isn't
more
activated. Like it's more of like a relaxing activity, screens, but that's not true. And your brain is like on fire and super activated from the screen. And so when you're transitioning from that, you want to do something that is actually relaxing and grounding and like brings you back to self. So anyways, that combined with the treat it like a relationship, I'm writing notes and I'm on a tangent and I'll shut up now.
No, I love that you said that actually, because I think that's where my brain was trying to go with the like attracts like thing. Like whatever I said maybe made some sense, but what you said connects to it and made me think of like, yeah, your brain is already fried and you think you want more, but you're just going deeper into that fried zone. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And it does make sense. Like the blue light is activating our pituitary glands and makes it think that it's daytime all the time and just like supercharging us. So I love that. I love that invitation for grounding.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about COVID. And how do you think today's teenagers are being impacted by the pandemic? And then we're very, very open to any creative socialization ideas that you may have, especially during these socially distanced times.
Yeah, this one feels hard because I'm like, whoa, I've seen the full spectrum of things working and not working in family. So I was kind of like, oh gosh, where am I going to go with this? But I will say it's been really hard for teens. Like unsurprisingly, a lot of teens have been suffering during this time and others have faced great relief as well. Like young people who had a lot of anxiety about in-person school, like in March, April, and May, they're like, hell yeah, right? Like all of the major stressors of my life were just taken away. I'm chilling, right? So there's, some people are experiencing that. I work with a good number of folks who are first year of college. Whoa, so hard, so hard. Like new environment, support system has been like, a rug pulled out from underneath you. You're in this new place and trying to anchor. And there's so many limitations because they're on campuses, but still doing online classes. So there's like no organic interaction with people. And like literally they're just in dorm rooms all the time. So it's been really the full range. When it comes to like strategies around COVID, I have had some conversations with parents who have wanted to sort of like work through some strategies for how to approach COVID with their teenagers. And some of the things that we've come up with together are just simply going through like, if you've seen that, I think it goes 1 to 5 or something, the COVID risk tolerance scale.
Yes.
Is it like 1 to 5? I can't remember.
Yeah, 1 to 5.
Yeah. So looking at that tool as a family and just helping teens to think about like, yeah, where do I actually fall with this? And looking at some science together if the kids are open. So they can actually feel like these decisions make sense to them, right? Because the especially when parenting teens. I think this is parenting children too, but especially teens because of their growing independence. It's best if things can be done with them, not to them. And so, the idea behind looking at those things together is that they're doing this together.
Yeah, make them a part of the solution for sure.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's done together. The other things, let's see. There's creative solutions. Oh, I think just in general, parents, it's good for them to get an idea of what their teen actually does consider safe or not safe, because parents might have an assumption that their teens like want to go and hang out in a house with 10 people, but like the teenager actually might not feel safe doing that. So I think that's the starting point too, right? Is just talking about what their sense of safety looks like and how they're going to know if they feel safe, what they're going to do if they feel unsafe in a situation or where it's crossing their boundaries. So those are my starting thoughts.
I think that safe, unsafe conversation and the boundary conversation is a good one for really us to have. My oldest is almost 10, but I feel like that would be an appropriate conversation for us to have with him too, with anything out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is linked to one of the listener questions we got, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it now. But it sounds like their teen is impacted by COVID in that they're anxious to go out and socialize, and like going to do something in public has given them feelings of panic. So have you seen that in your practice, and do you have any tips or how they can better support them in, I think from the way the question was asked is they don't want them to feel like life is unsafe, right? Like, yeah. I think that might be a fear for a lot of parents is like, what is this going to look like on the other end of us reconnecting because we've become so disconnected?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that's where partly looking at the science could come into play. Well, first of all, normalizing the feelings, validating always, right? Like, all of that. I hear you and understand where this is coming from. It is a scary time. This has been stressful. All of that validation, so, so important. And then looking at, the science together, and at least from the science that I've read, outside, distance, small group of people, or whatever, those are the things that I'm currently feeling comfortable with. And so like looking at that science and helping them understand like, okay, the risk in these things is relatively low. Maybe we can't say that anything is no risk, but we may want to consider these low risk things because you also are going to get the benefit to your mental health by being outside or seeing a friend that you haven't seen for months. And so looking at that sort of like risk benefit analysis together too. Yeah. And I think maybe, this goes into, well, I was thinking of the idea with starting with what feels easiest first. So, depending on what this family has already tried or what the teenager has felt comfortable with, but maybe it is just like, first we're starting with a walk around the neighborhood, or we're going to start with like going to pick up curbside together, or whatever the like, just scaffolding it, right? Starting with what's easiest and most comfortable, and then gradually expanding. Yeah.
I like that.
I do too.
So speaking of grounding and regulating, what tools do you teach the teens that you work with? What are some of your favorites that we can kind of share with our listeners to help build their toolbox right now? Because we all need it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because my first thought is like routines can be super grounding. And a lot of teens have been reporting that everything just feels so mundane. And so again, like kind of what we said in the what the fuck moment, everything is like blurring together. Mm-hmm. So I think the key is routine with variety sprinkled in. So daily routines, as far as like having some anchors in the day, whether that be like, in the morning, there's like, you eat breakfast and, do your self-care and maybe you do a little bit of movement. And then, okay, midday, there's some sort of other anchor. And then in the evening, it's going to be dinner together, whatever the things that, work for the family or that teen are, but creating some flexible, but, predictable routine. And then making sure that there is variety, because humans do need variety. So maybe that's going to a park on the other side of town that you've never gone to, or getting takeout from a place, like a cuisine you've never had, right? But like seemingly simple things that add in variety to that routine. I think that's important for grounding. Of course, like you mentioned with the screen time limits and relationship, like having something that is off screen, having routines that I think, if they can include nature or fresh air, great. If they can include movement, great. I think those are definitely grounding, and things that I talk to clients about a lot. And then, I think another thing for grounding in general during COVID is having regular check-ins, because like you said, we can be taking off in our mind through these screens where we're just like, who knows where we are, but we're not in our bodies. And so the check-ins to just think of like, how is my body doing? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Like normalizing those kinds of check-ins where parents are sort of prompting kids and teenagers to do that. And then hopefully the teenager takes over on their own and they do that check-in themselves.
Mm-hmm. I like the word anchor. I've been packing lunches even though we're home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So just as you were talking, I was like, oh, that's an anchor.
Yeah, I love that example. Yes, that's awesome.
I have not been doing anything like that.
It's the one, I mean, when I say
I know.
when I say I've been packing lunches though, what I've been packing, and it's Lunchables. So I'm literally putting a package inside a lunchbox, but I'm still doing it, and we have lunch and they get their lunch boxes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no, star cut fruit and whatever else.
Right.
There's a video of a dad and he's like watching someone like make rice and like sweet and sour chicken and like chop it up.
One.
And it's in like a bento box, and he's like pulling the Lunchable and like, it's like, what?
Yeah.
And then he like grabs a stalk of celery and just throws it in there, like fixed it.
I think that's like a TikTok side by side kind of. Yeah. I've seen that. Yeah. I'm definitely that dad.
Anyways, even with Lunchables, I created an anchor and didn't know it. So,
That's awesome. And Naya, even if you don't have, if you're not packing lunches, I bet there's other things that are anchors in your day.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. I can't think right now, but yes. Yeah, no, there definitely are. There's definitely some sameness or something that my kids can look forward to every single day that they can do with me. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit going back to teenagers. Any tips on how to discuss concerns about anxiety with teens if you're seeing signs or symptoms or any kind of red flags that come up?
Yeah, I think the first thing that always comes to my mind is like, look for the red flags, but not with a magnifying glass, because I think parents of teens do get really concerned because they are having less contact with their kids very naturally. Maybe not as much during COVID, but like, if they're out at school and then they have extracurriculars, or they want to go out with friends, or they're sleeping really late on the weekends, like there's less FaceTime that happens, during the teen years. And so looking for the red flags, but again, not just like obsessing over every detail. And of course, like normalizing that it's okay to ask for help, no matter if it's because we're feeling sad or if we're feeling anxious, or if it's like, also maybe we just, are having a bad day, right? So just normalizing that it's human and important to ask for help. Discussing support systems. I have like a guide on my website of how to create your support system. And it's truly nothing fancy, but it is just like, let's look at all the different layers and levels of support that we might have. And that can range from environmental, doing things like using lower lighting, if that's where you feel most comfortable and thriving, or, music, to who are the professionals in my life that could be teachers or coaches or therapists, to family, to friends, and, looking at all of this to see like, where can I turn if I need something? what are the tools that I can do for myself? And then what are the things outside of myself that I can reach for or ask for?
Is that accessible on your website?
It's linked in most of my blog posts. There's a blog post about it for teens on how to create their support system. And then it's like a freebie that I link on almost all of my blogs.
Okay.
So pretty accessible. I think if you just search support system.
We'll find it and link it in our show notes so folks can check it out.
Yeah.
Can we also talk a little bit about self-harm and suicide and how, well, one, it's not generally talked about, but also that this, or if it is talked about, it's like glorified in a show like 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah.
And it's not really like a true picture of, well, there were parts of 13 Reasons Why that I didn't hate, but I'm really bad tonight at going off on tangents. The question is, can we talk about self-harm and suicidal ideation in teens?
Yeah, I think, with these topics of anxiety and then specifically going into self-harm, I really feel like it's important for parents to balance information with listening, right? Because if the approach is a lecture of like, hey, these are the signs and symptoms, and it just kind of goes off onto a lecture vibe, then teens are going to feel like, oh, yeah, I already know this. Like, hello, I have the internet. And, it's just going to feel, it won't really land. And so I think the balance is in making space to listen and just saying things like, yeah, what do you know about anxiety? Or like, what are some of the statistics you've heard about self-harm? And is this something, that you've seen in your school? And just taking a genuinely curious stance to see what your teen knows, because they know a lot. They know a whole lot. And so that approach is helpful in them knowing that you're staying open and that you do really want to listen and that you're not just coming at them as the expert or, the information dump. And of course, it's the same thing as far as like, if there is a concern that their self-harm is happening, or if they do share that they've been thinking of harming themselves or that they don't want to be here, a parent's job in that moment is to do their best to resource themselves, to take some breaths and try to get themselves as calm and resourced as possible so that they can approach the teenager in a calm way and ask them if they can help them get support. And sometimes you're not going to necessarily ask them for support. You're going to say, hey, we need to go get support and we're going to go see this therapist, or we're, depending on what the situation is, you're going to help them and intervene at that time, but you're approaching them with a lot of love and compassion.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of times where it can be common to respond with a shame message, right? Mm-hmm. And so being really careful to stay with compassion and love and empathy and as much as you can, because you don't want it to turn into a like, well, why would you ever want to do this? Well, right. That's not really helpful.
Right.
Right. And especially if they're disclosing, like saying stuff's really hard right now, or I'm really feeling low about myself, like they're trusting you with something really big. Mm-hmm. And so just holding it as like carefully as you can and like giving it so much love and attention is really, it's so needed. Like you said, especially in a culture that is stigmatizing towards, mental health.
Alexis, do you want to ask this question? Because I think you wrote it.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I was just thinking about when we knew you were coming on, I was just thinking a lot about like teens and like the word teen and like teenager, and how there's also like this negative connotation about this stage in life, similar to like terrible twos, or there's words for threes and fours that I can't remember. Three-nagers. Yeah. Yeah, which I'm like the most complainy, talk bad about my kids person in the world. So I'm not saying that like I do this. I've called my child a terrible or a three-nager or dramatic or whatever. But I also like understand that we give this bad rap for things that are like actually developmentally appropriate, like behavior that is actually normal and should be happening and we want to see because it's a part of the process of growing and becoming a whole human. And so I just was curious, if you had any thoughts about how we can kind of shift that narrative or like tools for parents that when we get into that place is because we're frustrated and this shit's hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that it's a coping skill for us to like be like, okay, I can still show up if I'm just like labeling you as a three-nager.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my question was twofold in that, like, one, what do you love about teenagers? And two, how can we talk about this stage differently?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'll add the third layer, which you touched on for parents. One thing, I have another blog on my website. I do write a lot, so I am going to like plug my blog because there's a lot of tools out there.
Do.
It's one way that, I feel like the work can be really accessible to folks who live anywhere. But there's a blog about, what is the title? It's something about how to practice basically like inner teenager work. So kind of like inner child work for parents, but basically like thinking back to your teenage years and kind of like y'all said, Naya, you said in the intro, when you think of teen years, you're like, ooh, cringy. So if we can tap into that, if we can tap into like, remember that, like, remember how hard that was, remember how awkward that was.
Yeah.
I think we can respond from much more of that compassion and less of that frustration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? Because we're all like, oh, teen years. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good starting point. And okay, as far as teens go, okay, wait, one more thing about the parenting part. Just imagine, right? Teenagers are often told, you're not old enough to make that decision. But then they're also told, come on, you're old enough. You should be doing this on your own. Mm-hmm. So it's like they're getting slammed in both directions. And this happens at school and this also happens at home. So just like if we can actually look at those two forces and recognize, yeah, that's a pretty darn hard place to be where it's like, there's not really a right way to get out of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, again, for the parents can just help be like, whew, deep breaths. We're going to do this. We can do it together.
Mm-hmm.
And then as far as the teen aspect goes, I think it's pretty, in the teenage years, I think there's a lot of really cool exploration and identity development that's happening where it's intentional. I think in the younger years, it's more exploratory and there's beautiful self-expression and so much fun stuff that happens. And then in the teen years and like tween years, it starts to be more intentional. Like I'm choosing to dress like this very intentionally because I want this style. And I listen to this music because it really resonates with me in this way. And like very making a lot of choices. And I think that's something beautiful, right? I think if we all think back to the things that we picked in our teen years, we might laugh, but you also might feel that like, oh yeah, remember how into whatever thing I was?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so pure and it's so like, yeah, I think we need to sort of uplift that part and let them have their exploration and their identity play and, just really sort of love on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you said that, I was obsessed with Jewel.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
And I like begged for a guitar. So for my 16th birthday, my dad got me a guitar and I have photos in my photo box of me like pretending I'm Jewel. Like I never learned how to play the guitar, but I would dress like her and like sing her songs, pretend I was playing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it would be fun. Like Naya, you should share something. Like we should all share.
Oh my gosh. Me as a teenager. I finished off. So I started high school at a public school, and then I ended up finishing it in a private school, private religious school in a different state. And it's because my family moved at the start of what was going to be my junior year. So tip to parents listening, try not to do that because that'll fuck up your kids. And so I lost my whole support system. I was kind of starting all over again, and I can kind of figure out my identity and, almost like remake myself if I wanted to. So when we got there, I was the weird Indian girl with super short hair and a nose ring. And I kind of embraced that sort of outsider identity. And I think I used it as a shield or as a good reason to kind of keep people at a distance. And so my group of friends were kind of all the loners and the weird kids. Like I would hang out with Judd Nelson in The Breakfast Club if I lived in that movie kind of thing. And so that's sort of who I gravitated to, and then listened to like a lot of rock and a lot of punk, and kind of hung out with similar kids that didn't go to my school and stuff like that. So it was an interesting time for sure. And I know that that move definitely impacted it. Maybe not always in a positive way, but I think I was acting out isn't quite the right word, but I was trying to find some comfort in the upheaval, I guess. And that's what was comforting to me.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also true that like these parts of us, like I see a lot of what you just described in adult Naya right now, right? Yeah. So
yes.
And similarly, like, I mean, I don't pretend to play Jewel anymore, but I love a good like female ballad and like woman empowerment and Frida Kahlo. Like all of those things are kind of linked for me to my Jewel days, right?
Yep. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. I actually have like in the corner, I have a mobile that I made in sophomore year of high school, and it's orange, pink, and yellow pieces that are also then painted like zebra print. And I had zebra print like seat covers in my car and on the steering wheel. And I just like doing these loud, obnoxious, annoying things. But it was kind of like, it was just like me saying, hey, I'm here, even though I didn't always feel that big, it was kind of like I'm practicing taking up space. And yeah, it's interesting to see how like that some of that stuff still resonates, like where I still do things that are kind of like shave my head. Hey, I'm here.
Right. Exactly.
Fully grown. My brain is fully formed, but I still need to do this thing.
Yeah. I joke, and I recently said to my husband, well, I don't think I was joking, but I was like, high school Naya would be proud of me as an adult, I think. So that's kind of giving me a little bit of solace. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to jump to the squad questions before we run out of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we got a couple of questions from our listeners and our followers that had questions. Sorry, my brain is fried today. So Alexis, I'm totally fine with you talking all the podcasts.
I asked one of the questions in the middle. We got two questions. Okay. So the other question is, are there any tips for helping teens learn how to talk to strangers?
My first question about that is, why do they want to, or why do they need to? So again, like, I don't know the context of the question, but if it's like, for life skills of being able to go and buy your own Subway and like go through that process in a way that feels easeful, that's one way, where it's sort of like functional. But then if it's also like, so I guess just since I don't know the context, I'll say that just to talk with a teenager and explore like, why do they want or need to have these skills or have these types of interactions? And I guess also, it sounds like this family would probably have a sense of why they're maybe avoiding that, or like what some of the fears are. But if not, exploring like what feels hard, and then trying to strategize around how there could be supports for those kind of like difficult aspects. And again, kind of like in a previous answer, scaffolding things. So starting with the closest circle and then expanding out, as gradually as is possible. role playing is actually, sometimes I think I sometimes feel so awkward doing role playing and I'm just like cringing at myself doing it. But most of the time teens are actually pretty up for it. And if they can do a couple of role plays, they're going to go into a situation having a little bit more confidence and at least having a lived experience of a situation that may not be exactly how it pans out, but they've at least gotten, warmed up to it a bit. So yeah, I would suggest that. And, this is something that actually as an introvert myself, I've done where I'll keep a list of like topics that I'm comfortable talking about on my phone. And if I'm especially at a gathering with a lot of people where I'm just like, shit, I have to talk to people. I don't know anybody. I need to like review this or even like review some sentence starters or like question stems, things. This is like very teachery of me to use that language, but questions. It's just like, hey, what are the things that you're into? Or, how to start kind of a sentence on a hobby or an interest, and having that somewhere accessible where they could see it if they just go to the bathroom or, take a break, or even it's okay to look at your phone during a conversation, but having something that's a tool to bridge the gap in that interaction.
You're making me think of, do either of y'all watch Parenthood, or have you?
Oh, I watched it a while ago. Yeah.
We're watching it now, and one of the families has an autistic son, or no, he has Asperger's. He's like my favorite human.
Oh, wait, I have not seen that. I was thinking of a different show. It just clicked, but I'll have to look that one up. So
he's
tell me
like
more.
Awesome, because I mean, part of what's hard for him is like not being like just saying things like they are, right? Like being, I can't think of words tonight. What's the word for that?
Like, are you saying like being literal or?
Yes, literal. Thank you. But he's just like, it's just like so refreshing. Like I just love him. And again, that's, well, maybe we said that in the other episode we recorded, but like, I feel like sometimes there's like, especially when it comes to mental health, it's like, it's a problem and we need to fix it. But like, I love that about this character in the show, that he's so literal, and it's a gift to me. Like, and so the thing, I can't even think of things that he said, but last night was just really funny because he had to apologize. He's like learning how to date because he doesn't understand what that looks like. So they're having to like really break it down for him. Like, how do you know if someone likes you? And anyways, he had to apologize to this girl because he didn't read her no correctly. And he was just like so matter of fact. And I just loved it. It was like really cool.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a way that we could look at anything that's sort of like stigmatized or, seen as like a diagnosis that can feel heavy. And I was talking with a client about that earlier today about ADHD, how it's like, embrace those freaking ideas that you're getting. Like, we just need to find a system for you to capture them because that's it. Like, you do have a gift, not everyone can think so broadly and can think of, out of the box things. And so I think you're right. Yeah. Just kind of exploring. And I mean, I guess, I don't know if I have a way to bring it back to the question from the listener, but I was thinking like, yeah, even, I don't know if the teenager would identify as shy or an introvert, that's up for them to decide and know, but like those things all have gifts too,
Yeah, very much so. So this last question that we got from our listener, I think both of you, really all three of us could probably talk about. This is related to finding a therapist. And it is, what questions should you ask when picking a therapist? If you've narrowed it down by part of town or telehealth, insurance is accepted or in specialty, then what? How do you know someone will be a good fit?
Well, this goes, as I said, I'm not a therapist, I'm a coach, but I feel like it can be a similar process. And honestly, sometimes, and also I have a pretty long mental health journey myself, and I have seen therapists basically all my life since I was 15. I currently have 3 therapists because I'm in couples therapy, group therapy, and individual therapy. And I feel like sometimes you just have to be open to the exploration of knowing that you might meet someone and have a session or a few sessions and then decide it's not a good fit. So always giving yourself that gift and of permission, the permission to change or the permission to like not proceed in a relationship, a therapeutic relationship. And sometimes asking about values, like right when the pandemic started, I was looking for a new therapist, and I did ask the therapist if they were doing any anti-racism work. And they said they were aware of the topic, but they weren't actively doing it themselves. They identified as white. I identify as white. The listeners might not know that. I didn't say all that, social location. But if there's something that's a value that's super important, just being really direct and putting that, in the sort of like initial consultation call is important to do as well.
I think that's great advice. Alexis, anything to add to that?
Oh, no, I should stop talking.
No, you're fine, really.
Do you want to share how folks can find you?
Yeah. So Courtney Harris Coaching, my website is courtneyharriscoaching.com. Instagram, same handle. Facebook, probably the same handle. I think so. And those are about all the things that I use. And my blog is a main place where I share resources as well as Instagram. And then I do also send out a weekly email, which I feel actually rather proud of. And so that's another way that folks can stay in touch and sort of just like hear what's kind of going on in my world, and usually in relation to things happening with coaching clients, of course, always maintaining confidentiality. But I like to share gems or patterns that I'm seeing in my weekly messages. So that's another way that folks can also stay in touch.
That's awesome. Are you currently doing everything virtually, or have you transitioned to seeing folks in person?
Yeah, all virtual, which, there is the benefit. I can work with people that live in Austin and live anywhere.
Anywhere, yeah.
I do appreciate that flexibility and access as well.
And being a coach, you don't have the restrictions that therapists do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and do you have spots open?
I do have spots open right now. Yes, I would. And I would say, like, sometimes people ask, like, what are the ages? Because I say tween, teen, and young adult. And if you feel like your kid is a tween, then they'd probably be a good fit. That's kind of what I say. And I have worked with clients as young as 7 and as old as 27. So it's actually a pretty big range. But really, the bulk of clients right now are high school to college.
Got it.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for being such an awesome resource for us.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate what you all are doing and always bringing interesting conversation.
Thank you.
If the Top Knot Squad's content makes you laugh, nod in agreement, or makes you feel less alone, we'd love your support in the cost of producing this podcast. Visit patreon.com/TopKnotSquad to learn more about our budget-friendly sponsorship tiers and how you can help ensure that TKS has a future. Every little bit helps.
If you like what you hear, then be sure to click the subscribe button in your podcast app. While you're there, leave us a review. You can find us on social media. Just search for Top Knot Squad. We welcome your feedback and love making new friends.